Dead? Not anymore. How can you teach such? Ripple, these people are here to learn, and you're closing their minds before they even have a chance.
I'm going to kiss you.
Conquered brain death.
Let it happen, Crampton. Humans are such easy prey.
You'll never get credit for my discovery. Who's going to believe a talking head get a job in a sideshow?
Hey everyone! Welcome back to another episode of Sleazoids, the podcast where we go down the rabbit hole of 20th century genre fare, from the most influential canon classics to the trashiest exploitation films that we can get our hands on, and invite you to tag along in helping us create a canon of sleaze. Each week is a double feature grindhouse style where we discuss two films loosely related by subject, genre, actor, filmmaker, or franchise. And at the end of each episode, along with our honorary Sleazoids, which you can become by subscribing on Patreon, we decide on the official ratings and rankings for every film that we cover. Patreon subscribers also get an on-air shout-out and 2 bonus episodes every single month. We've been doing them for a while now. You guys got like 7 or 8 of them. Go back, check them out, do that up. Speaking of shout-outs, we haven't done... I think we skipped last week, so we got a bunch to do. D, just the letter D. Thanks so much. Great name.
Appreciate you.
Timothy Hunt, Caleb Cunningham, and Ethan Cartwright. All you guys have been getting all of that bonus sleazy content, so thanks so much for joining us on this journey. Patrons, 2 weeks ago would have been the last time you heard from us. What were we talking?
We did... Oh, if it was patrons, would it
Oh,
be
no, that was
the
free
free
listeners.
episode,
Yeah,
yeah.
you guys would have heard us back with Anya Stanley of Daily Grindhouse and a bunch of other places. She brought on Martin Scorsese's Taxi Driver and paired it with Abel Ferreira's The Driller Killer,
Which was bizarre
and brought us
and
into the world of
amazing.
video nasties. That was a very fun episode, so if you haven't heard that one, go check that one out. And patrons, you guys would have heard from us last week where we would have been talking for the first time Alfred Hitchcock. We talked Vertigo, and we paired it with Brian De Palma's loose, sleazy remake, Body Double, which is a film that I personally love.
Yeah, me too. That was great.
So anyway, if you guys want that episode, head on over to Patreon. That's where you can get that. But this week, we're changing it up. Usually we have a guest on, and we have them bring on 2 films that they have selected, but we knew ahead of time that these were 2 films that we had to cover. They're very iconic, 2 80s splatter body horror films by Stuart Gordon, and we knew we had to do them, and we were figuring out who could we possibly get to talk about these films with us. So we asked, and luckily she said that she was interested. Thank you so much. We brought on one of the star of both films, Barbara Crampton. Barbara, how are you doing?
Hey guys, I'm good. How are you?
Good. Thank you
We're
for coming
always doing
on.
excellent. Yeah, thanks so much.
You're welcome.
I was honestly a little bit shocked, so I'm a little happy about it. So
You shocked I said yes, or
a little
what do you
bit.
mean?
Yeah.
I was like, does
Oh.
she, I mean, I've read a lot.
I was too easy.
No, don't think that. Don't think that. But you know, I know you've talked about a lot of these films a lot, so I was a little like, is she gonna want to come out and talk about them? But I'm glad that you do. And we have a lot of fans out there who are going to be interested in.
I think very excited.
Yeah,
Well,
having dive back into these ones.
Thank you. The funny thing is, Josh, I had met you a number of years ago, and we had a couple of nice interactions at Fan Expo in Canada, and I liked you, and then when you reached out to me, I said, okay, I'll do it because I like this guy. So that's why I'm here.
That's
really.
a great.
It's because of you, not just because of the movies,
well,
but
thank you so much.
because you asked me and you seem nice.
Thanks so much. All right. Well, I don't really know how to... I think when we introduce these films, I guess we'll do it in the actual segments because I don't really know else what to say about these ones other than...
There's a lot to talk about here.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll just get right into it. Re-Animator?
Re-Animator. Let's do it.
Herbert West brought a lot of dead people back to life, and not one of them showed any appreciation. H.P. Lovecraft's classic tale of horror, Re-Animator.
Mr. West.
You'll never get credit for my discovery. Who's going to believe a talking head get a job in a sideshow?
It will scare you to pieces.
All right, we are talking Re-Animator, or H.P. Lovecraft's Re-Animator, the 1985 sci-fi horror film, loosely based on H.P. Lovecraft's serial novelette, Herbert West Re-Animator. From what I understand, Lovecraft's parody of the original Frankenstein story. In this case, directed by Stuart Gordon, a prominent theater director turned horror filmmaker and genre filmmaker in general, and produced by Brian Yesna. And the film stars Jeffrey Combs, Barbara Crampton, who's with us today, and David Gale, the legendary David Gale, excellent in the film, and Bruce Abbott. The film sort of follows, it's the title of Lovecraft's story was Herbert West, but this film is actually sort of more about Dan and Megan, two sort of like all-American med students who have a run-in with Herbert West, who is a little bizarre, it's a little strange.
A little bit obsessive as well.
The opening prologue of the film has Herbert West sort of performing I guess this is the title, a reanimation on a mentor professor that he's learning from over in Switzerland. And everyone's saying, you've killed him, because he is sort of bubbles up and explodes a little bit.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, it doesn't look good for West in that scene.
No, but he says famously that he gave him life.
Yes.
And that pretty much perfectly defines
even if
the
it's
film.
violent. And
Yeah, but it's nice because it foreshadows, the horror that's to come.
Absolutely.
And it was interesting you said it really was Dan and Meg's story, because originally when Dennis Paoli wrote it with Stuart Gordon, they had in the forefront of their minds that it was really Dan and Meg's story. But I think because Jeffrey Combs was so amazing in that role, he hijacked the whole thing.
He did steal the show.
And he made it a movie about him, which we don't care. He was terrific and wonderful. So that's all good.
Oh, absolutely. But yeah, I think kind of what gets lost in this film, because I think a lot of people, or at least people that, travel in horror circles, they do love this film, but I find there's, a lot of people appreciate it in a sort of, some people view it as sort of a comic camp type thing, and it is funny. It is funny in more of like a surrealist sense to me, but it does have heart to it, especially with the Dan and Megan story, and I think that the fact that they wrote that does come through, even if people a lot of the time mostly will talk about the gore effects. But there is like a romantic tragedy at the heart of the story,
of course.
Which the ending, I think, really gets at.
Well, and to me, I think the movies that I appreciate the most that are horror have some foundation in some emotional realism or some connection to something that you're striving for or that you've lost. And I think we have that. And initially, when the movie was written, Stuart didn't know how funny it was going to be. And Jeffrey and Bruce got together during rehearsals we had for the movie, which was about 3 weeks before we started shooting. And they both kind of thought, this is kind of funny stuff. Even though Bruce Abbott had to play the straight guy, they were both in on it, that they wanted to play up some of the humor. And really, I don't think it's anything that a lot of diehard fans don't know, that really that's one reason why From Beyond isn't as funny as Re-Animators, because Stuart wanted to make From Beyond as more of a serious horror movie. And in a way, everybody loves that Re-Animator has the camp and has a certain style and all of that kind of stuff. But we all didn't even know, and even Jeffrey didn't know how funny it was going to turn out to be.
Well, I think a lot of it just comes from the imagery itself, which is a lot of times very, very surreal. I think Pauline Kael actually famously called it Pop Buñuel, which is obviously he's the Spanish surrealist filmmaker who famously did that silent film shot where the straight razor is taken to the lady's eye.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And like his films also have this very gross imagery, but he does it with so much absurdity and with such a knowingness to it that comes through. And I think what honestly helps is the fact that all of the performers here, you guys all play it straight, which there is real
we do.
character and real soul to the performances that make the imagery not overtake it.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we're not laughing at it like, you know,
Exactly.
like they did in Dr. Giggles, you know, it's not, which is a completely different kind of movie, but, you know, we're with the material, and the importance of the material is what was important in the scene. And any kind of humor that came out of it was something that was, you know, was sort of laced in throughout, and it just wasn't so intentional. So, you know, it's not, and it wasn't like, I don't know,
It's not trying too hard, you know? It's just, it's arriving
trying too
naturally
hard.
from your
Yeah.
story.
Yeah,
Which is, it's an excellent story as well.
I find
too,
like the
so.
humor, it's almost also, because we're not used to some of this medical stuff that they're doing, such as like when the doctor's peeling off the scalp and stuff.
Oh,
like
it's
that.
almost
He's,
like shock.
Yeah.
It's a shock effect.
And
you're
he's-
like,
and
how
he
else do
says
you
it-
react to that?
He says it so normally, like it's
Yeah.
just like pulling off a large skin of an orange. It's no big deal at all.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, and the
yeah.
funny thing is, you know, the sensibilities of a writer do come through. So I know Stewart and I know Dennis Paoli, the writers. I've known them for 35 years. Both of them are extremely funny people, and they're warm people. So I think that's why this movie comes off that way. It comes off warm and a little humorous, you know, because that's their personalities.
Yeah, for real. So I guess we'll get into we'll get into a little bit of the story here.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
it kind of starts out with Dan is in a bit of a financial conundrum.
Yeah.
He's looking for a roommate. His girlfriend, Meg, who is also the daughter of the dean of the medical school that he goes to school with, she doesn't seem that particularly interested in moving in with him, even though she does like him. But that's a big step. So she's like, hold up. And a great bit of, and I think this is probably mentioned a lot, but a great bit of comedy is the Stop Making Sense poster that's above their bed. Excellent Jonathan Demme documentary about the Talking Heads, which obviously, Talking Heads, you know?
Yes, foreshadowing
to
way of things to come. Yeah.
Exactly. There's going to be some talking heads in this film.
Yeah.
But basically, Dan, who is looking for a roommate, happens to coincide with West being expelled from Switzerland. I don't know if they just flew him out of the country and were like, do something else.
Yeah.
But he comes into the medical school and he's got ambitions. And I think if largely this film is about anything, it's sort of about, you know, the corruption of this kind of ambition and of a particularly kind of male ego in the in both the academic field and the research and science field, because that's what ends up kind of ruining everyone in this film is
Their
you know,
constant
basically
need to
two
keep
people
going.
having a pissing contest.
Yeah, that's right, because it's just obsessive.
And Dan gets caught up in it for seemingly, you know, altruistic reasons. One of the opening, I think the first time we see him, he's trying to resuscitate someone who's just died in the hospital.
Right.
And he's trying really, you know, that they're telling him, dog, they're
It's
gone.
done. You gotta
you're
know
done.
when to stop.
But he can't. But he doesn't really know when to stop. And that's kind of the issue, is that Dan probably wouldn't do a lot of the things that Wes does, but they kind of both push each other's worst qualities.
They
in
have
that.
so much empathy, but for like different reasons, it seems.
Yeah, and then Meg gets caught up with, because she knows every single person who's involved here. Her dad, the dean. What's the professor's name? What's Gail's character's name? Carl Hill. Dr.
Carl
Hill.
Hill.
Yeah.
And Dean Halsey. Yeah.
And Dean Halsey. Yeah, so, you know, it's kind of a push and pull between these four men in the science industry and Barbara Yu, who kind of gets caught in all of them, unfortunately.
Yeah. We were
Just
discussing
some
how it
pretty
seems like
horrific ends.
your character was kind of one of the only
Innocent.
innocent characters that's just having to deal with all of this bullshit.
Yeah. Well, I guess. I mean, I was kind of innocent, but I also I tried to play her, even though, you know, Lovecraft doesn't write a lot of women, as anybody who reads Lovecraft knows, and so I'm sort of inserted in there. But I also tried to imbue Meg with a little bit of smarts, you know, which was kind of written into the story. Although, you know, Herbert West refers to me as the bubble-headed co-ed. I never wanted to play it like that. I wanted it to be tragic, and I wanted to, you know, to play it as someone who, you know, had altruistic, you know, meanings for everything, and loved Dan, and, you know, just wanted things to go nicely in her life, and they just didn't.
Yeah, it seemed like everyone else had sort of these underlying sort of for Hill and West in particular,
Selfish
perversities.
reasons. Yeah,
and then
definitely perversities too.
But then also, there was...
Yeah, but the dad didn't. I mean, the dad was a
did
little...
not.
My father wasn't, but, he came down a little bit hard on Dan Kane, throwing him out of the university. That was a little bit harsh. And if you remember, Bruce Abbott's, his moment was so beautiful. Everybody talks about Jeffrey Combs, and he is amazing and wonderful, and we're like best of friends. and a lot of people don't talk about the depth that Bruce Abbott brought to that role. And when Dean Halsey says, you're expelled from the university, the look on his face, and he was just about to cry. I mean, he was so believable in the role. I mean, so lovely and, just wonderful.
Well, absolutely. Yeah. And Dan especially, and then obviously his relationship with Meg are what kind of is the tragedy of the film largely, because Wes seems like his end goal is met. And the real lives that got ended were Dan and Meg's, which is, when Meg has to confront the fact that her dad is now a zombie-like monster, it's horrifying. Yeah. Right. And then when Dan realizes that he's obviously responsible for it, he has a lot of conflicting emotions about it. He wants, his passion is to be able to really end death. Which is, it's very altruistic, but it's very much as is proven by the film. It's kind of a thing that, to be careful what you wished for kind of scenario, where is Herbert West says that this is life, but is it really life? Yeah, exactly. And that really gets to Lovecraft's sort of anxiety about mortality, and then Gordon threw in his own body horror and splatter elements, which for me are some of the most effective horror, if simply because they kind of, for me, get at the anxiety of transformation, of change, of impermanence, and it's an anxiety that obviously things like body horror and things that we actually previously on the show already talked Scanners and Videodrome as well with Cronenberg, and it's just an example.
It's giving deep Cronenberg vibes for sure.
Yeah, well, it's just a case of it's a way to make that anxiety visceral and real and physical, which is a lot more cinematic and a lot more wild when you actually see it on the screen, obviously. Because the makeup team on your guys' movie, incredible.
Ridiculously good.
Because I don't know what that stuff looked like on set for you, but on screen, the way that it's lit and the way that it functions.
Yeah, which stuff are you talking about in particular?
Oh, well, I was talking about a lot of it, but I was thinking in particular, especially a lot of the stuff in the climax. My
with all the different bodies, how the different just the crusted blood on half of their bodies.
I was so shocked by the bit where because I watched this probably around the time that I was in film school, and the thing that shocked me the most was the exploding intestines that come out and strangle the dude.
I know.
I was blown away by that effect. I couldn't believe what I was watching.
I'm pretty sure they shot that backwards.
Did they? That makes a lot of sense, because then you'd be able to play it backward. Like you could rip it off of his neck, and then you could play that backwards, and it would look like it grabs on. Interesting.
Yeah, that's a good effect. Yeah, but we had a lot of special effects teams on the movie, and different people have gone on to have amazing careers directing and creating The Walking Dead, and
I mean, really? They work on that. That's cool. That's awesome.
Oh yeah, we had some of those people. I mean, just an amazing team. I mean, if you go back, well, actually, even more on From Beyond, but if you go back on both of these movies, you'll see a lot of names that are quite familiar to you. But there was a lot of blood that was used. One of our slogans. One of our slogans for Stuart Gordon was "More blood is not enough," because it just never was. He'd always want more and more and more. And we made the movie at a time like today. They want to shoot movies in 15 to 18 days if you have a low-budget movie. And this was considered a low-budget movie, shot for, I don't know, maybe $700,000 35 years ago. So maybe that was more like $3 million today. I don't know if somebody would do the math on that. but we also had about, I guess they said we had something between 19 and 21 days, but we actually went overtime every day that we shot on the movie. I got paid more in overtime than I did in my regular salary.
Oh, wow.
So
you're okay with that?
Yeah,
I was okay with
I'm
that.
curious what his backers and investors thought of that.
Yeah.
Well, I think it was Charlie Band at the time.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
He
I don't
was
know how much
get what you need.
Yeah.
Well, it was the crew wasn't really paid that much more because it was a non-union crew, but they had to pay us. So Stuart would just make everybody stay. He would say, "I'm not done," and we would all be like, "Okay." And so
was it worth it? Did you guys get the shots? Was Stuart happy eventually?
I guess. I mean, look, I was a young actor at the time, so
That's true.
I wasn't going to say, no, I have to go home. I'm tired. I was like, we're not done? Okay. And so many, many days we stayed 15 hours, 16 hours. And the last couple of days, there were like 2 18-hour days in a row because it was Christmas.
Wow.
So we had to finish before Christmas. But we're digressing. I don't know if you're going to by plot line if we want to go back to that.
Honestly, we travel all over the place on the show.
Pretty loosey-goosey.
Yeah, sometimes we talk about completely different movies by accident, and then we have to stop ourselves.
All right.
But just speaking on the blood thing, was it John Nolan, I think?
Yeah.
Yeah, he said
John
that
Nolan.
he goes from, he went from, he usually used 2 gallons of blood per movie, and this one he had to use 24 gallons of blood.
I mean, that's
Which is
ridiculous. I didn't
nuts.
even know what that number was. I mean, that's insane right there, right? Yeah.
It's absolutely crazy.
Oh, and
apparently they looked at real medical books just to try to get those bodies to be as gross as possible.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
And it works. That finale
comes
is just
across,
insane.
Yeah, and everybody took a lot of trips to the morgue. I know I didn't go because I didn't have to, but Bruce and Jeffrey both went to the morgue a couple of times and looked at. I mean, I've seen a few real dead bodies in my life, but only because my friend, her father owned a funeral home, so she used to scare us when we were in high school. By we loved it, but we would go over to the funeral home at night when her parents weren't there working. And we'd look at all the dead bodies.
So you were meant to be in horror.
I guess. I don't know. Yeah, I guess. I finally realized that I meant to be here. I finally accepted my fate. Here I am.
That's right.
Yeah.
Where were we on the plot?
Yeah, I was trying to remember. So we're...
So Dan's, he's trying to convince him to... Jeffrey's character is trying to convince Dan to help him, and Dan has
he revives his cat,
money,
right? That's the big thing.
With the money,
kills the cat,
what?
and then he reanimates the cat. That's what he does, and he's just
he
look.
moves in. I mean, reluctantly he moves in. I tell him, don't have the guy move in. You got to check him out, and then he says, no, I'm
like
going
an odd
to.
Character. Yeah,
I think you had it right.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, it's a woman's instinct. I knew it.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
But
and then
Dan needed that money, I guess.
He did. He needed. That was the main thing.
But where did he get that money? I'd like to know where he got that money.
Where Wes just he pulls it out of his pocket.
Wes.
And he's like, there you go.
For real. Yeah.
Like nobody's ever brought that up. Where he was kicked out of the school in Switzerland. He arrives in America and all of a sudden he's got all this money. Where did he get that from? I don't know.
Yeah. Suspicious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Wes's main thing is that he kind of just has an uninhibited, all-consuming kind of ambition. And I think people kind of who have looked at Lovecraft's story have said that his ambition kind of comes from the fact that he's a little socially awkward, and he's trying to hijack the reproductive system, basically. And he's just like, I don't really need to get in a relationship with anybody if I can just bring life to all of these bodies that are around me all of the time.
That's interesting. Who was that that said that? Did you?
Oh, I don't remember. I was just reading it. I was just reading
it.
Take.
I like
Apparently,
that
that's a pretty solid theme in Lovecraft's original text, but I actually haven't gone through and read because apparently it's a 6-book long serial comic or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Something of the such.
Yeah, I read them years ago, but to be honest, I haven't read them in so long. I mean, I read them like 35 years ago.
Well, from what I understand, Gordon's script here is about the first half of the first one.
Yeah.
Oh, just the first half.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So some Lovecraft, it's
Man, it must go
controversial
into
in
so many
Lovecraft
places,
circles.
yeah. Well, yeah, I heard that people said that he would never have approved such an exploitive thing.
Oh
or
no.
Something like
oh
that.
no.
But
no, he wouldn't have. No, I'm
no,
sure.
because
Yeah.
there was an author of some. It was a book based on H.P. Lovecraft, and he said that he actually might have done so. He thought that he might have enjoyed some of the exploitation. But I haven't
really?
I haven't read any Lovecraft though, so I'm just speaking for other
okay.
Yeah,
people.
I've
here.
only read a few bits and pieces.
I know some of
he's
the
one that
stories,
I've been
like
really
Cthulhu
wanting
and
to get
stuff,
into,
but,
though.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, also he was, as a person, he was very socially awkward. So I probably
Very
of
empathetic to
his
West,
own
then.
personality was, in the Herbert West character. I'm sure.
Yeah, I heard he didn't even get recognition until like years after he passed away. Really,
That's unfortunate. That's
yeah,
scary.
because now he's such a huge name. Like people know him and based a ton of art on his ideas. So. Yeah.
Well, yeah, a lot of people are scared to adapt it into film, which is why it's amazing that Gordon was able to get
Except
two
for Stuart
films out
Gordon
of him.
does too, yeah.
Yeah, because a lot of his fans don't think that he's very easily adaptable, and maybe that's proven to be true. But regardless, I think that Gordon was able to make films that maybe aren't super close to what Lovecraft hoped for, but they are unique and special in their own way, in Gordon's way that really works.
Yeah, a lot of his writing is very atmospheric and, coming from a place of just inner terror and, turmoil. And you have to have a framework for that. And so I think what Stuart does is create a framework for our worst fears, that were representative of what was going on in Lovecraft's mind or heart or soul.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and I think that really comes back to the actual tragedy of Dan and Meg, where Dan is this guy who really wants to end mortality. West does too, in his own twisted way, I guess. But West is more in it for the ambition. Dan is in it for he actually wants to help people in a lot of ways. Yeah. And that's what really gets us to the finale, is that Dan basically unleashes West on everyone around him and Meg. And that's kind of what happens, is he helps West after West kills his cat.
Yeah, just throws it right to the wall there. That was nuts.
And he shows Dan, look, I can reanimate your cat. And I'm like, dog, that doesn't really look like your cat. That's terrifying.
And not only that, but it's suffering. It's clearly suffering.
Oh,
so
yeah,
like,
what's his line? Rebirth is doubly painful?
Yeah, would you want to be rebirthed if, like, you have one of your legs, like, sticking out over here, and, like, the cat was mangled, and I'm like, you're just letting it suffer. I think death would have been a more merciful thing for the thing. Like,
yeah, but Dan's got the blinders on, so Dan
Right,
helps
exactly.
West break back into the school after he's been kicked out of the med school for getting into a bit of a pissing contest with Dr. Hill, whose work he calls, in Europe, we call it plagiarism or whatever he says, which is like a really, it says a lot about West, that the dude can't make friends.
Right.
He could,
in the middle of class, Yeah. Not the
Immediately his first thought is, who's the big guy here? How do I make him hate me?
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that West, over the course of the film, becomes, gets that sort of anti-hero status of he's a guy who you're kind of like, I'm not sure about you, man. I really don't think you're doing the best stuff.
But you're definitely not Hill.
But you're not Dr. Hill, whose like worst inner thoughts are compounded by both West confronting him and the reanimating serum, which I heard was like the glow stick kind of fluid or whatever.
Yeah, right.
Which looks excellent on film.
Yeah.
But then obviously the big things happen. Dr. Hill comes back. Dr. Hill gets... I forget how he gets reanimated. Remember who stabs him?
Well, he can control... Isn't it himself? Because he can... they cut off his head.
With a
Oh,
spade.
no, then they has to...
Yeah,
you're
but
right,
he...
You're right, because he has to... yeah.
But didn't he... Didn't West inject him in his head and in his body with the reanimation fluid?
Because he didn't know.
Because he said parts. I've never done parts before.
Oh,
right,
yes.
because he didn't know
Remember?
that he could still control his
you're
body with
absolutely
just
correct.
his brain. Yeah.
Yeah. So Dr. Hill, who is headless because of a spade,
Which is a great
that West
effect,
hits
too.
him.
Like, just him walking
Yeah.
around holding his head. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Right.
There's not a lot of films that could get away with some of this stuff. Well,
Yeah.
Barbara, I have to ask, while you were shooting the film, because you would have seen a lot of this stuff, were you like, what am I working on?
Yeah.
Like, I'm curious how this looked to you.
No, I completely went with it the
Yeah?
whole time. No,
Nice.
oh gosh, no, it was like, I had no idea that it was out as crazy and as outlandish as it was until I saw the movie, and I went, holy crap, look at that thing. I mean, it was just a cool story, and I really didn't think, I've said this before. I mean, I think most people say this about these movies that turn into cult classics. You never think it's going to be anything, and then it's become something over time, and you go, oh, wow, you're kind of surprised. I mean, it's like any famous artist who paints, and they think, oh, my painting's all right, I guess, until, it turns into Rembrandt or something. Or, there's been a lot of artists that were discovered after they died and, didn't really make a lot of money. I mean, Mozart was like that too. So, I mean, I don't know. I thought we were making a fun movie. I was having fun with a few people, working on it. It was one of my first movies, and I was lucky to have a job, I felt like. So, I didn't have anything to compare it to. I didn't have any. I didn't go. It wasn't like I was a horror nerd like you guys, and I was working on the greatest horror comedy, one of the greatest horror comedies of all time. I didn't know that. I didn't have any reference point, and I've really only become a horror fan as time has gone on with my career. So. Everybody, including Stuart, was shocked that the movie did as well as it did.
Oh, that's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing that you can do all this work on this thing and then watch it kind of take on a bit of a life of its own.
I was wondering.
Oh yeah.
I was wondering what both of your takes would be on. It seems like a lot of the it's a running theme in both the films.
Oh yeah.
The two evil guys, the Dr. Hill, and then I can't remember the From Beyond characters.
Pretorius.
Yes. It seems like they're very focused too on sexual perversion. And I was just wondering, what Stuart Gordon might be saying there, or if it's the writers, or what that is.
Well, I think it's a
they
case
go
of
really over the top in some scenes, and I was just curious what maybe your take
I think it's
on
just
that one.
pushing the envelope, and I think Stuart famously in Chicago, he was part of the Organic Theater Group in Chicago. He mounted a production of Peter Pan, I think, and everybody was naked in the show. So, Stuart's all about pushing boundaries and seeing how far he can go, and he, that kind of was his thing back in the day, and he's not a sexually perverse person that I know of. I mean, I just think that those were themes that he wanted to explore about humanity,
For sure. And he does particularly make the evil people have those, it seems. Like, it's the two main guys there.
Well, and it's interesting, too, because before the horror kind of breaks loose, you wouldn't think those about some of these people. Maybe Pretorius a little bit more.
He had the dungeon and all that.
A little bit more with Pretorius. But with Hill, for example, I think what's so interesting is that Hill seems like a typical... maybe even relatively kind professor, or if not kind, at least, competent. And then,
but he's obsessive too. He has
is.
an obsessive personality, and so does Jeffrey's character.
For sure.
I have a friend whose husband is a brain surgeon, and she said, there's a little bit of obsessiveness about a lot of doctors because to do the kind of work they do, they have to be so single-mindedly focused and obsessed. So, if you're an obsessive personality, you can get obsessed by one thing and another thing. It doesn't have to be just one thing, right? I mean, you look at people who are alcoholics or people that, have issues with addiction and things. And sometimes it's not just about alcohol. It could be an addiction to a lot of different kinds of things. And how that plays out in society can be different depending on their circumstances or how they were brought up. So I think, what you guys are hitting on, is something that you're very smart to look at, is this, this kind of obsessiveness that both of these, somewhat evil characters had.
Yeah, they do have like a sort of like intense discipline and focus to them. I think actually one of our patrons, Steve Carlson, writing about the film, said that he felt that the film was that there's not a wasted moment in it, and that the film itself seems almost possessed by that focus.
Yeah.
Which is
that's
kind
an
of
interesting way of
point.
putting it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and I think especially with because I've watched both cuts. I don't know which one you watched, but there's two cuts of the film, and one is the 85-minute one, and one's like the hour 45.
I think I watched the 85.
Okay.
I think.
Both are good. Both
Yeah.
are good, but I think
Is
he
it
was
the
referring to
unrated?
the shorter one, which is like cut to the bone.
Right.
But it's it's still really good.
I think, was it the unrated? Or that's the hour 40?
I think that's the hour.
Okay,
40
you know what? I did watch that one. I watched the unrated.
I'm not
so-
sure what more it contains.
Yeah.
I imagine it was
Yeah.
just stuff that
A few
they didn't
deleted
want to
scenes,
put in theaters or
Yeah.
put on the first release
Right.
anyway.
Well,
Yeah.
there's also a version called the integral version, rather, and it's apparently everything that was put in this, like the theatrical release, that was taken out of the unrated, and then everything that was in the unrated was put in. So they just
So they
put it all
combine them
together,
both.
and it's
I see,
one
I
giant
see.
one.
Yeah, that makes me dizzy, guys. You know more than I do.
all kinds of
Yeah.
of cuts of films, and
Yeah.
all kinds of things. But either way, yeah, I thought that was an interesting point, and I think that this sort of obsessiveness is what corrupts Dan. Is that he ends up getting involved with these two, and they reanimate first just a corpse that's laying in the morgue, which kind of brings it back to zombie-like fashion.
Right.
And I guess, at the same time, the sort of way we perceive modern zombies wasn't necessarily fully established yet, so this film had a hand in doing that.
Oh, that's cool.
Which is interesting. And also, once they do that, they basically unleash hell in the medical school and end up reanimating as well the dean and Meg's father, which seems like a really good dude until he seems sort of manipulated by Dr. Hill.
Right. He is a good dude. Yeah, he's totally manipulated by him. Yeah, I'll stand by my father 100%.
Yeah, well, because Dr. Hill does a little Jafar moment where he hypnotizes him or something.
Yeah.
And there's a big lighting change. It's an interesting moment.
Right. That was actually, we shot, now you guys are reminding me and I had forgotten this, but we shot more moments like that. I mean, he kind of used that on me at the dinner table as well when he was talking to me, oh, Meg or something. I don't even know. I can't remember what he was saying about me or to me, but I sort of was entranced by him for a moment, and then I sort of was like, what? And we shot more moments like that where Dr. Hill had this sort of powerful mental ability, like a Svengali type thing over us, and they didn't use a lot of it. They only used a couple of moments in the final film.
It's one of the first moments where you kind of get a feel that Dr. Hill is, has some sort of, some weird qualities to him, and this very sort of manipulative aura to him that you sort of see it you don't necessarily see it in the day-to-day life of him, and then all of a sudden it starts coming out, and then it's amplified by West when they come head to head, and basically all hell gets unleashed at the medical school. Now I had a quick question for you though. There's one person, and you might not even know because it's such a small moment, but there's an extra in the film. So your character Meg, she's waiting outside I think the hospital wing, and I think she's waiting to either
in the
see
lobby.
Dan. She's in the
I know
lobby,
what you're gonna
right?
say.
Yeah, you're in the lobby.
Yeah.
The guy you're sitting beside.
Yes.
He's
the answer. What's the question?
He doesn't have a mouth, or he's got all this thing wrapped around him, and you hand him like a pamphlet or you hand him something.
Yeah.
Who is that guy? What were you saying to that guy?
That's John Carpenter's father.
Is it?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
No idea. I just noticed that it's a nice little detailed moment, and I was like, what? Who is that guy? And what is his relationship with Meg?
Yeah.
Nothing. No, it was
Nothing?
just funny. It was my one little funny moment. I had one funny moment.
Well, do you know
in
what?
the
I
movie.
loved it, and I very much
Yeah.
noticed it. It was very...
That's awesome.
Oh,
That's
thanks.
so awesome.
Yeah.
So they unleash all hell on the, on the medical school, and is it in the basement of the medical school where the big finale takes place?
Yeah, I believe so, because they have to take the elevator back up, and that's when that one guy,
Yeah.
like half of his body,
he's
just charred.
He's trying to get in.
Yeah.
And it's a horrifying sequence because Meg, I think, is kidnapped by her reanimated father, who she's trying to save because she doesn't understand exactly what's happening yet. She seems like the least informed character at that point in time, but she knows that something's wrong with her father, and her father kidnaps her and takes her to Dr. Hill, who's now carrying his head around in a really hilarious fashion. And this is where we get to an actual laboratory that basically looks like a almost comic book version of like a Universal Monsters laboratory, like the Frankenstein or Bride of Frankenstein kind of style thing. Things get particularly horrifying here, where Dr. Hill, who was harboring a proclivity for his student Meg, starts kind of being very, very goddamn creepy. And at the same time, it also has a moment that I only caught actually on this rewatch, but there's a moment that Gordon leaves in where you can see Dan kind of sneaking in the background of the laboratory.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which is a nice little touch.
I actually didn't even notice that.
But this sequence for you, Barbara, is obviously horrifying for Meg, who is being assaulted by Dr. Hill, and her own father has brought her there and is part of his zombie horde that he has created by, I think he reanimates the bodies, but then also does his own like laser lobotomy to control them.
Yeah.
And
I
basically,
guess so,
I think
yeah.
he's gone full out supervillain, basically.
Yeah.
Which is it's and the set that you guys are working on is absolutely incredible.
Yeah. That was on a sound stage. We built that, or I didn't build that. They built that. Yeah.
You didn't personally build it? Well, all right.
Yeah. No, I didn't make enough money for that. Yeah.
But the horde kind of starts rising up, and then West and Dan come in, and they're going to put a stop to Dr. Hill.
Yeah.
And this is kind of where things, as they say, get knocked into 12th gear, where all the gore effects and all those 20 gallons of blood or whatever kind of come into.
Where it all comes into play.
Yeah, they all come into full effect. And as we mentioned, there's the exploding body bit and the intestines and coming out and strangling people.
And I also love, like, eventually, because Barbara, you were mentioning how the Dean had actually quite an emotional performance that not a lot of people talk about. But then he has that kind of triumphant moment where I guess he sees his daughter and actually saves them and helps them.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I was talking about Dan Kane
Dan.
having the emotional weight of his character in a few scenes.
It's true, but he does especially after that scene.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just following that.
And he was with Dean Halsey, my father. But there's a moment. They wanted to have a moment where the dad, recognizes me for a second, but is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, because he pretty much,
yeah.
I mean, he really helps. Like, he's one of the big parts of saving everybody at a certain point.
Well, and that's just it, too, is that, we're watching all this horror unfold of all these reanimated bodies, and there's just one moment where you're like, oh, that is my dad.
A glimpse of humanity.
Yeah.
Right.
And again, it's a moment like that really elevates, the horror, because it makes it that much more horrifying.
Yeah, because
when
you kind of
realize
realize he might have, he might be self-aware somewhat.
there might be something in there, and then you realize that all of the people that they're killing and all this, sort of shocking, fun horror or gore that you're seeing happening, there might still be people in there. They might be in the back corner, but it's there's something happening there, which
it's like Westworld.
Very
like
much
Westworld,
like
a prelude to Westworld. Yeah, there's a real person in there inside that computer body that looks like a human.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, exactly, and it really plays with you because we've been looking at people this whole time, and then all of a sudden they seem slightly off. They're not people anymore, but then you get a little glimpse of it again.
Right.
And then Dan and Meg move for the escape. They go through the hallway. They go to the elevator. Dan has a bit of a kerfuffle with one of the reanimated
zombies.
bodies. Which is
And it is a zombie movie. Like a lot of people say, is it a zombie movie? And people debate that, but I think it is. To a certain extent, there's zombies in that.
I mean,
movie,
I guess it's
sure.
technically
They are
what
zombies.
zombies are. They're reanimated corpses, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
the idea.
Yeah.
It's technically.
Nailed it.
They're just not going for the brains. They're going for any body part whatsoever.
But this all builds to Meg gets killed. And it's really devastating for Dan. And this
It's
is where
sad,
and
yeah.
Bruce's performance here especially is it really, really sells it, because he realizes that he was trying to do something good and he might have just destroyed the world. He hasn't really figured it out yet, but he has a really great moment when he takes Meg, he gets Meg into the hospital, and we get a repeat of kind of the opening scene where he's trying to resuscitate a patient, where he's trying to bring back Meg, and it leads us to, I think what is actually kind of poetic ending for the film, which is Dan chooses to reanimate Meg, and he knows,
even though knows
we've spent the whole film, and Dan has too, seeing exactly what this thing turns people into, and yet the thought of losing Meg is so painful that he would rather bring her back like that.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is just,
Yeah.
you think about the depth of that sort
Yeah.
of feeling that you have to get there, and for me, that really is what makes the film is, this heartbreaking moment for Dan and Meg.
Right. No, yeah, it had foundation in a love story. I mean, it's basically a love story gone wrong, too.
Yeah, exactly.
And just from an actor's point of view, I remember a lot moments in acting, because those are the things that I grab onto more than anything. And I remember when we were shooting that scene, there was one take where Dan Kane was like over my body, right? So Bruce had some stuff that was coming out of his mouth and his nose because he was crying, and like stuff was coming out. And everybody looked at it like on the playback, and everyone said, "Oh my God, that's it. That's the moment. You have to use that. It's so real and so believable." And he was really overcome, Bruce Abbott as the actor. I mean, it was really a great moment. And Stewart said, "No, I'm not going to use that, because look at that stuff coming out of his nose. That's not attractive." I mean, a guy with all the frickin' blood that he could possibly
that's what I would
want,
say. If
24
anything, you feel
gallons
like
or
that would
whatever.
elevate
It's like-
it. I think you were
He
right,
was
Barbara.
like, "No, I don't want the snot coming out of his nose." And we were all, in the moment, we were like, "Stewart, you have to use that. That's the best take. That's the best take." We were all saying that to him. "You have to use that. It has to be in the final film." And he was like, "No, I'm not using that." And we're like, "Stewart, you have to. Come on, please."
If anything, that feels like totally in line with the rest of the film. That even in this sort of very sad, heartbreaking moment, that there would be a little bit
It didn't
of.
make it in. It didn't make it in. I'm so mad about that.
I'm gonna write a letter.
Right?
Tweeting him.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
That's surprising. That really is.
Yeah.
I know, right?
It's just so
The
much.
blood,
There's so
the
much
gore,
visceral.
whatever.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, no, I don't want the snot coming out of his nose.
That's too much,
it's
guys.
That's not good looking. I don't want that on my handsome guy's face. I don't know. I don't know what the reasoning was, but he just didn't want it. So it was his movie.
Yeah.
Yep. That's the end of that.
But still.
Yeah.
All right.
shocking.
Well, Barbara, this is the part where we're gonna enter the reductive rating round, which we haven't told you about this yet, but this is where we finish up our thoughts on the film, and generally with guests we give it a rating between
1 and 5.
1 and 5, and I don't know how you feel about rating your own stuff,
but might be weird.
Which is why again we haven't had an actual.
No, I'm not gonna. I can't
performer
rate
on.
my own
Can't-
stuff.
Yeah,
I
that's
rate
fair.
it,
It's a
That's
little
fair.
too egotistical. You would be a little Dr. Hill, whatever. It's good.
Yeah.
It's good. Either way, for me, this is like a super easy 5. One of the better horror films of the 80s. I love the sort of surrealist style to it, that it has sort of like this comic book gore effect, and it's very stylized, and it's I'm a big fan of the Universal monster films, and I feel like this kind of brought that into the 80s horror scene. I feel like even the ending itself kind of echoes The Bride of Frankenstein, where Frankenstein realizes that he spends the whole movie trying to get a friend, and then realizes that when they reanimate the bride, that she's maybe not going to be a fan of him. And it kind of echoes that he has to make the tragic decision to kill them both because he's like, we're better off dead.
Yeah.
And I feel like, Gordon really kind of gets at that really powerful, profound melodrama in a very, stylized horror film. And I love it a lot.
Nice.
Thank you.
This one, I'm going to give a 4 out of 5 for now. It's a super strong 4 out of 5. I was surprised at how much I eventually cared about these characters. I always thought, like, everyone talked about the film as, like we were discussing earlier, it's got a lot of the campiness and things like that.
It's kind of like the Flash Gordon effect, right?
Right. But, and then I watch it, and I'm like, this is awesome. Like,
it's great. It's wonderful.
It's got a lot of depth in it.
It's a lot of great filmmaking
because of the
in it,
masking
too.
of some of the humor, I think some people just don't take it as seriously, I guess.
Something gets lost in translation sometimes when people are, talking about how funny it is. And I honestly found it kind of sad and horrifying. Yeah, and that's more I think,
part of the humor too. So yeah, I thought it was great. So that would be my score.
Awesome. Well, I think we're gonna move straight into From Beyond. Ready for From Beyond, Barbara?
Okay, sure. Go for it.
Let it happen, Crawford. Humans are such easy prey.
From the makers of Re-Animator, From Beyond.
All right, we are talking From Beyond, the 1986 sci-fi body horror film directed by Stuart Gordon. So, Barbara, real quick, how much time did you guys have between shooting Re-Animator and then shooting From Beyond? 'Cause these movies came out 1 year apart.
Well, I don't really remember.
No?
Yeah, it's kind of all a blur now, but maybe it was a year or more, I guess. I don't know. A year and a half, maybe.
Okay. Sounds about right.
Did it feel did going back to that original crew feel pretty familiar, and was it
No, it wasn't the original crew. I mean, we just
I guess not. I just meant more, Stuart Gordon again and Jeffrey
Combs,
and
Well, just Stuart and Jeffrey. I mean, because we made the From Beyond in Italy, and that was a very new experience for me. Most of the crew was Italian, and it was my first time going out of the country, was making that movie. So I just showed up in, this old historical city of Rome. And I was like, where am I? What am I making a horror movie here? And we shot it at the old Dino De Laurentiis studios in Rome.
Oh, right. Remember we talked about Dino when we did Flash Gordon, because he made so he did a lot of producing on films like these. Oh, okay. But From Beyond is another H.P. Lovecraft adaptation, this time of a short story of the same name. And this one gives a little bit of a juicier role to you, Barbara, where you get to play Catherine, and her last name is
McMichaels?
McMichaels. Catherine McMichaels. And you get to star alongside Re-Animator Jeffrey Combs playing Crawford. Holy, these names. Are these from the H.P. Lovecraft story? Tillingist?
Yeah. Tillingist.
Great names, though. And this time you guys also added Ken Foree, right?
Ken Foree,
Yeah, Ken Foree, Dawn of the Dead, which we would have watched. We just watched Dawn of the Dead actually in the theater just a couple months ago. Which was a lot of fun to see again.
And he's kind of got like a bit of like, there's definitely less comedy in this film, but there's some moments like when he's running around in his underwear and stuff like that.
When he tackles Combs in his underwear.
Oh, it's great.
And the best part about that is immediately after tackling him, he's like, "What are you doing?" And then he's like, "I'm trying to turn off the circuit or whatever." Yeah. And he's like, "Oh, why did I just tackle you? You would have done that faster if I didn't do that."
Yeah.
Either way, yeah.
So he was the comic relief for the movie for sure. Bubba.
Bubba. And but you said about this film in comparison to Re-Animator is that when you and Stuart and Jeffrey were making it, that this was supposed to be the more serious genre film, a little bit more heaviness to it. Maybe not necessarily in the romance, but in the actual character themes
I
and
think
drama.
Stuart wanted that. You know, Stuart's the kind of person that doesn't really like to repeat himself. And if you look at his filmography, he does a lot of different kinds of things. And Re-Animator, surprisingly for everybody, was a lot more humorous than we thought it was going to be. And he specifically said to us, I want this to be a serious horror movie. So I was like, oh, okay, I guess I mean, I wasn't really funny in the first one. So if I wasn't funny in that one, I was going to be less funny in this one. Yes, the tone of it was different, and that was by his design.
Well, and you can honestly feel the tone really early on, and you can also feel the fact that you must have got a significantly bigger budget for this one, just because.
Oh yes, much bigger. I mean, 5 times as much. I think our budget was $5 million.
Wow.
And back then, so how much is that today?
Probably
Yeah,
a lot.
that's true.
Probably like
That's a lot.
15 or 20.
And we shot that.
Yeah.
We shot that movie for 6 weeks in Italy, and they put all of us up. You know, we had Matt Goldberg and my ex-husband was the focus puller on the movie.
So there
David Boyd.
wasn't a lot of overtime on this one, I imagine.
No, I don't remember there being a lot of overtime.
I find having money probably makes your production gives you a little bit of cushion and ease.
Yeah, nobody.
You don't necessarily have to strain yourself to get things
No.
done.
And nobody felt rushed also because we were making a movie with Italians and they like to break for lunch and have minimum an hour. And they drink wine at lunch because that's what they do. So we had wine at lunch. Sometimes I would drink it, sometimes I wouldn't, depending on what the scene was. But, nobody hurried on that set at all, ever.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Well, this film kind of opens similarly to Re-Animator, just kind of setting like a tone-setting prologue to it, where Combs's Crawford is working on a resonator machine for his mentor professor type. Did Stuart have a really bad mentor professor in his life? Because it seems like he's got
a recurring theme here.
It's a recurring theme here. But anyway, Crawford.
I think he has some trouble with authority.
That would make
Stuart
sense.
doesn't like to be said no to.
Yeah.
By anyone, even me. I love the guy. But if I would say, well, I'm not sure if I really want to do that to Stuart, he would somehow talk me into it. Not that I was the authority, but I think he has a thing with, anybody, producers or anybody telling him that he couldn't do something. He's a very single-minded person and a great artist, and he wants his vision to come through. He doesn't want somebody to say he can't do something. Well, so whenever anybody said you couldn't do something, he always pushed harder.
Yeah, and it does come through in his film simply because you can see the affection he has in Re-Animator for obviously West, which is obviously how he managed to hijack a movie that probably wasn't written for him or written necessarily about him. But in this film, it's your character Catherine who has that drive. You and Jeffrey have kind of switched roles where you have that kind of discipline and that focus that maybe is the undoing of the people around you.
Yes, I think you're right in the theme, was in a way similar, but we switched roles definitely. And it was definitely hard for Jeffrey to go through that. He's used to being a very active performer, and he admits freely that playing that part in From Beyond was very difficult for him to have the makeup on applied all the time, the bald cap, and
the bald cap,
doing all that stuff, the eating of the brains, and all the other kind of stuff
Sucking
he did.
It
wasn't, it was. I mean, he did a great job, and he always does a great job with every role. But he'll admit freely, it was very difficult for him. To come to work every day.
Yeah. Well, he had some great scenes.
He did have some great moments.
I especially love the camera work here when he says he's like, when he bit his head off like a gingerbread man.
Right.
They got that zoom. Yeah, it's really well done. I think he still has some really great moments, but.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and Ted, who plays Pretorius, gets to particularly ham it up in comparison to everybody else.
All the makeup he's got to put on, like, holy hell.
But the idea is that he sets up this resonator that takes them to the beyond, another dimension filled with creatures, and the effects in particular are really well done. What happens is that a creature in the beyond sucks Pretorius's head off. And absorbs him, consumes him. And I think I mentioned briefly before the idea that body horror is a lot of the time about transformation and impermanence and the sort of anxiety of that, and you can get at that with the actual physical flesh. And this movie is more literally actually about that. Where you see these people actively, where normally you would see a film where a character goes through an arc and they come to a new conclusion or they become a new person. This is people hijacking different bodies. And you see Pretorius and especially Jeffrey as the film goes on later does that. And for McMichaels, it's more of an internal transition, but it's no less stark. As we move through the film.
Right. Well, she didn't get absorbed into the beyond, so she didn't transform, but the internal longing. Yeah, it was kind of like the resonator was turned on. It just allowed you to see more, feel more, as she said, and that's something that she was kind of a repressed personality, so she was highly drawn to the resonator and what the feelings. And again, sexual, that initially that can bring out in you, and they talk about sex as, being creative and some of the seed of creativity. So there's something to that, I guess, in a story, in a movie about, that is a creative expression.
A lot more here, and it feels more in tune with the actual character feelings, which is more because for Re-Animator, Dr. Hill is just kind of like a kind of sick dude who gets amplified. And here it kind of affects everyone
for sure. I feel like Re-Animator also focuses more on like the obsession with staying physically here almost, and whereas this one seems like they want to they want to transcend, they want to become infinite, and
there you go. That's a good thought.
Because it seems like they just have this absolute obsession with becoming, feeling more, consuming more, being more knowledgeable, having more wisdom.
Becoming. I think at one point he said Pretorius in the Beyond says that he's become better than human. Right. They're trying to appeal to his humanity, and he's just like, I don't need humanity anymore. I'm better than that.
I have transcended humanity.
Right.
And I guess we're kind of getting a little bit ahead of ourselves here. But the basic idea is that Pretorius and Crawford activate the resonator and go to this Beyond. It consumes Pretorius and leaves Crawford in a shocked mental state, justifiably. And he has a great moment where he runs out of the house, and I don't know about the how Stewart decided to include this bit, but I love the lady who's calling the police on them, the neighbor, and she's
Bunny Summers.
She's excellent in her.
That was the actress's name.
In her bit that she gets there, where she's just like, the neighbors are at it again. The mad scientists are doing the funny lights, and it's a great little moment of levity, and it has obviously. Crawford ends up having to go into a mental institute where they diagnose him with schizophrenia, which puts him on the radar of Catherine McMichaels, who I guess is, trying to investigate schizophrenics and is trying to investigate, how Crawford became this way so that she can possibly, cure this. Again, it's an altruistic
I want to help
purpose.
him,
right. That she gets involved with, and then she kind of pushes it and pushes it and pushes it in the same way that West and Dan do in Re-Animator.
Right, she gets a taste of it, and once you have the taste of it, there's no going back, supposedly.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's what happens is they go into the mental hospital. She checks out Crawford, and she's like, take me back, help me recreate this experiment that made you this way, and let's kind of work from there, and
Yeah.
we'll find a way to
Mm-hmm.
help everyone who might
It's a bit of naivete
open up a
there.
portal to another dimension, which is
yeah.
a thing that a lot of people are going to do in the Stuart Gordon universe. A really interesting sort of thing happens when they first turn on the resonator, and I guess this is how they bring Ken Foray on as well, Bubba, who is the officer who is in charge of making sure that nothing happens to Crawford in McMichael's guardianship.
Yeah, and he ends up kind of not following instructions very much when it comes to the don't move, those demons are going to fuck you
Yeah.
up.
Right.
And do you think it was kind of I felt that it was, he's just so not used to this kind of environment at all, like because he did you say he was a bodyguard? Is that essentially what he
was like, I think he's an officer. I think he's
Okay.
an officer, and he's
He was a police
So
officer
do you
or
think
something.
he
but
was like curiosity, basically, that caused him to really go after those organisms?
honestly,
and take a
it
look?
could just be. I think largely
Was
the
he-
entire film is kind of like a curiosity that everyone
For sure,
is.
for
Everyone, all of the characters, sort of act on their own. Because that's what happens is McMichaels has an altruistic purpose, but eventually it does sort of just become I gotta see, I want to see more, and it seems like this sort of it's sort of like an allure to again, we talked about sort of like this transcending.
Yeah.
There's an allure
there's a power
that.
to it. Yeah.
Yeah, where you can escape sort of your bodily woes,
Yeah.
and find something more spiritual. Although obviously for this film, I don't necessarily know that they find anything particularly profoundly spiritual. They just
No.
find more horror in the body.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Anything
like
more
it's
anxiety.
going into another dimension.
Yeah.
That this dimension exists and that we haven't experienced it. So
That it's just around you all of the time, and that
Right.
activating your the gland, the pineal gland,
the
Yeah.
pineal gland. Yeah.
pineal gland. Good old.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is directly stolen from Lovecraft or not,
Yeah.
but the idea that could be your sixth sense and could open up
Right.
a whole dimension of demons and
Your
creatures
third eye.
is pretty nuts. And it reminds. I think we got to mention it because it's almost the same idea as Cronenberg's Scanners,
yeah.
where they open up their third eye with their ability to sort of mess with other people's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of the effects gave me
Bodies.
those vibes too. There's even that one scene with when he's got that weird name, the doctor, the evil guy. I can't
Pretorius.
remember. Pretorius. When he's first introducing himself as this new transcended human, and he's like, I don't need the body anymore, and his face rips off, and he reveals this like reptilian
Yeah.
thing. It gave me
Right.
those Scanner vibes at the end when they're having the mind battle and their skin's pulsating and all that kind of stuff. Like
Yeah, and
And I had a
especially
very
when the
similar vibe
gland
to
like
that.
pops out of his head and it's like a
Right.
little snake. The homeless guy calls it like the little snake man.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
He just wanted to see more than any man has
Yeah.
ever seen. Yeah,
The
that's-
third eye.
that's-
It's usually presented as this beautiful representation of knowledge that we don't know, but now it's just
Yeah.
this alien sucking out brains for people.
Right.
Yeah, and it looks awesome too. When you guys
It's
activate
incredible.
the resonator and Gordon chooses kind of all these big pinks and blues that combine into like a really tone setting kind of purple color.
Yeah, because it's almost beautiful, but you can tell that there's a darkness behind it.
Well, and that's just it. Is that's how the characters like this light comes over them, and they're like there's something beautiful about exploring and seeing more and exploring, and then that's when the creature absorbs them and is like welcome.
Yeah. Now you're really here.
Yeah, well, the color scheme kind of goes along with your feelings about it, right? Your feelings
Yeah.
about exploring more, or going, where no man has gone before. It's just like the colors are alluring, and then when you get there, you're like, oh, holy shit, I don't really want to be here. But you do. I mean, because it's grabbed you, and you
Yeah.
and it's kind of like if you talk about themes or something, it's like, I think what horror movies do for people is that it allows us to see the most horrible things that you could possibly imagine and survive, right?
Yeah.
Or get to experience those things that maybe you really don't want to experience in life, but that you think about or that you're afraid of, and then you see it on film, and you get to go there, but then you get to go home and climb into your cozy bed and you're all safe.
Well, that's definitely a distinction between the audience and the characters. Because what's interesting about both this and Re-Animator for Gordon is that it kind of seems that none of his characters kind of come out unscathed in this kind of movie, and it's sort of unique to the body horror genre in general. And same with Cronenberg is this idea that you really can't go back. Yeah, it's you've been changed forever. That you've been mutated, whether that is bodily or psychologically. And I think that the huge Pretorius was it a model on set that you could see? I'm curious. The creature that Pretorius is turning into.
It's so
abstract. Oh yeah, it was live. It was a live action piece.
Because I wasn't sure how much the lighting is doing on just how sort of clammy he looks and kind of. And
the creature is so abstract. It's it's not even trying to be any shapely thing. It's
he's got a really elongated neck, and at one point he asks Jeffrey to come up to him and touch his shoulder, and he puts his fingers into him.
You know the Rick and Morty episode where they do the Cronenberg thing? It looks like one of those creatures, just absurd. There's no logic to it. It's just this this gross bug from a different dimension.
Right.
It's crazy.
The shininess and the clamminess on the creature, though, they got by using a substance called methyl cellulose, and it's a food thickener. I don't know how much they use it anymore. I think it's still okay to use. It's very it's clear. It's clear and it's very thick. And they used to use it in McDonald's milkshakes. They don't use it anymore. God. Now the milkshakes are made with ice cream.
Okay,
but they used to
thanks
use
for confirming that they've at least changed that, because that would I would never eat a McDonald's milkshake again.
I would just think
if you told
of
me
the
that
creature.
the jelly these dudes are covered in.
I just
used to
think
make
of this creature from Beyond.
We had buckets of that on set, and it was very cold. And when I was in the leather outfit, and I didn't have many clothes on, I was covered with that. And I think when I turned the resonator on at one point and the creature was above my head and it was maybe going to suck my head in as well, but I think Jeffrey turned it off, or was it Bubba who turned it off? I don't know. The diehard fans know who turned it off.
Yeah, I think that was the part where Bubba tackles him.
Bubba turned it,
and then Bubba pulls the electrical wiring out because I think Jeffrey at that point is having his head sucked up.
Yeah,
and that's the part where he has to get the bald cap on because he's been half eaten by a worm or whatever.
Yeah,
right. But they put methyl cellulose on all of us, on everything.
Really, every time you were attacked by one of the creatures.
Yeah, except when I had my hands tied up, when Jeffrey tied me up. And I saw the little creatures, the swimming creatures in the air. I don't remember them using any of it there.
I was actually going to ask you about that part because I'm curious. Was that Catherine sort of starting a relationship with the Beyond from being in there for so long? Because it seems like the eels kind of help her out in that situation.
Well, they only held me up because they were drawn to the light, supposedly, and so that's why I struck the match, so that they would eat. Yeah, the light, whatever. That was a little device.
Catherine
I don't
is
know
very
how.
resourceful.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I really think that was a great device on the filmmaker's part, but I guess if you guys don't have any trouble with it, nobody's ever mentioned.
No, I didn't.
She likes.
In fact, I honestly projected my own thought onto it, which was the idea that somehow Catherine was sort of in the same
using
way.
them. Oh.
Yeah, well, because I thought it was
kind of doing the
same way
opposite of what
Dr.
the
Hill
was
can,
doing.
Yeah, Dr. Hill and Re-Animator
using
could
it for
manipulate.
Yeah, so I thought that Catherine
was
kind of having a relationship with the things in there because she's been in there so many times now, rather than Pretorius, who seems to just want to consume everything.
Yeah,
he wants to become one giant thing. He wants everything to be part of
him.
I
think that would have been a good layer. They actually should have put that in. I like that. I don't.
We'll just say it's in there.
That's what they meant to do.
Yeah, we'll just say it's in there.
Oh, all right. Go ahead.
Nailed it. But yeah, so what kind of happens over the course of the film is just you guys activate the resonator multiple times. At first, it seems for reasons to try and help people, and then eventually
Yeah, it
kind
seems
of
scientific, and then it becomes obsessive.
and then it does become more of a curiosity.
Well, and I believe what Crawford was telling me, or I tell him that I believe him in the very beginning of the movie, and then I tell him I want to see what you saw because I believe you, and then she turns it on, and it gets turned on, and then she says to him, he says, no, now that you believe me, we have to stop this. And she says, no, you always run an experiment twice to check the results. I have to see if this is going to happen again. But of course, the resonator has gotten her. It's got its hooks in her. And she wants to see more and feel more like Jeffrey's character did in the beginning. And at that point, she's in charge, and there's not a lot to turn back from.
Yeah, because
Combs would have to go back to the hospital. Those are really his only options. It's either help.
Yeah, because I think she's lying to him. Lying to
Yeah.
him. I mean, they could have left right away. She could have said, "Oh my holy crap! He's right. I saw."
Yeah, because
the
Crawford
Beyond
and Bubba are both like, look, that was
happened.
not good.
That was
Yeah.
real.
That was not great.
Yeah,
I don't want to do it again.
Absolutely.
And then I think Catherine eventually just says, we're going to sleep on it. We'll figure it out later.
Yeah,
and then
right.
then in her sleeper, she's woken from her sleep with just the pure allure of the resonator.
Yeah, it's calling her like the resonator's calling
exactly.
to her.
And that's when she activates it when everyone is asleep the second time.
Right.
And that's
Right.
where things get really, really messy.
Yeah.
And I think Catherine is frightened by her second time in there, but again, she's in there for so long that she's starting to see more, and you do feel like, again, a lot of people would complain that obviously characters should just
Leave.
don't do the bad
Yeah.
thing and just leave. But
the whole point, I think, is this kind of
but you do feel it. I think the movie
Yeah.
does make you kind of feel that there's something beautiful. There's something
like, hypnotized
possible.
by this
There's
power
possibilities.
and wisdom and,
You
yeah.
do. It makes you curious, and I think that's a really good thing that everyone pulled off making the film, is that you do. I honestly kind of just want to see more of the Beyond myself.
Yeah.
I kind of wanted
Right.
to see more,
Which is crazy
So-
because it's mostly it seems
It's
not
terrifying.
very good. Yeah, it
Yeah.
seems absolutely terrifying for us.
But then those eels came in, and I was like, oh, they don't seem like terrible.
Yeah.
They seem
Yeah.
like just normal. They seem like normal animals. That's totally fine.
Yeah.
What else you got in there?
Yeah.
But every time they activate it, obviously Pretorius is waiting there at the gates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To
Sensing it.
to sort of like what is he in control of the Beyond? What is he going to do with us if we do go over?
It's clear he doesn't have good intentions for everyone.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
He has very selfish desires, and they make that very explicit when they go up into his sort of like sex dungeon type
Yeah.
area where he's got like a camera set up to film his escapades in there, and Bubba is just like, your guy was pretty sick,
Yeah.
and I think Jeffrey says in response that the dude was a genius.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like
Right.
so it's kind of just a case of, I think that's kind of what the film largely, I think both of these films are kind of largely getting at that there is a price to these
price to pay.
Yeah, there's a price and consequences to the things that we want to discover and the things that we want to do. And especially if you have desires that are a little bit weirder than the average person,
Yeah.
which both Pretorius and Dr. Hill have.
And once again, there are things that they can't come back from because once it's experienced, it's there. Especially the Doctor, because he becomes once again that abstract creature that no one's coming
Pretorius
back from.
clearly wants to turn the other dimension into his own giant sex dungeon.
Playground, yeah.
Although even though he says it's actually, I think multiple times he actually says that
Well, he thinks it's love.
Well,
He mistakes
I don't know.
it because I think Combs kind of says, like you don't actually know love, you just possess, or something along those lines.
That's the argument he makes to him, and I think though that Pretorius isn't necessarily even interested in actual sex. It's more of like
It's a power
thing, which is, and I think he views this
Power
creature
gets
he's
him
turning
off rather
into
than-
is that he has like the ultimate power, which is just to consume people and take their minds. That's eventually what he's more interested in, is taking
The
everyone's
mind. He was interested in the mind. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. But there's a price to pay for like going somewhere or getting information about another area of life that we don't have control over, or that we don't know, or that God hasn't given us. You know, we're given this life and we walk around and we have children and we have a job and whatever. But what is in that other dimension? What's in those places that our dreams come from? Or, you know, where do people go when they die? Where's the other planes of existence that different people talk about in different books?
That's exactly
you know,
spot on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, you know, when we dare to go into these other places, or want to go into these other places, what have we lost? And you know, those themes are explored in both.
Worth it too, you know.
And were those losses worth it? I mean, they definitely were not in Re-Animator, right?
Yeah.
And in From Beyond, you know, Catherine McMichaels loses her mind.
Yeah,
at the end. So they're
great ending.
Yeah, I love that ending. It's so
that was something that happened just in the moment. I mean, I was supposed to jump out of the window, or the stunt double jumped out of the window, and then, you know, I kind of decided on that day or somewhere in rehearsal that I think she should go mad from this. I don't think that was written in, if I'm remembering correctly.
I think that's
honestly, it's very important.
It works so
I think
well.
to the film.
I think it's the best ending it could have, because I feel like you've at that point.
How else do you come out of that experience?
Yeah, your character has seen so much and now has all of this knowledge that she might have gained from being in the dimension for so long. But now she has to try to live a normal life now.
Yeah.
That would make someone go absolutely mad. And so the laughter and the screaming is just kind of, you know, working together there. And it's.
Well, I also imagine, and I took that from Jeffrey and what he played in the very first scene, because I think he was, you know, they were wondering if he was insane.
Yeah.
And, you know, what was wrong with him? Is he insane? And,
yeah, it's
a
really good callback.
Yes,
because
was.
Again, and it's the you get the police lights outside the house and stuff too.
Right.
And it does feel like a direct callback to the scene where Jeffrey is running out all hysterical, and then they put him in a mental hospital. And that's honestly what you imagine is next for Catherine, which is really sad.
And what's interesting is when you said that, yes, he is insane, and it's not the way that the doctors were looking at the insanity. It's just that they can't understand that what he has seen is real, but it's gotten to the point where he has to live in this reality, so he has gone insane. It's just they think that he's just making it all up. And
well, that's an interesting point you bring up, because so from a doctor's point of view, Catherine and Jeffrey's character are both insane in this world, but we're really not insane. But we can't almost live in this world anymore once you've gone to the beyond.
Exactly.
How can you actually live in this world?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You've seen too many crazy things.
I've seen too much.
Yeah, that no human being.
Well, yeah. I mean,
no going back.
I'm curious how I'm going back from watching that moment where Jeffrey pops out of Pretorius like birthing style with the jelly on him,
screaming like he's coming from the depths of hell. It's just so awesome.
I feel like I gotta get something washed out of my brain. It's like
Jeffrey really goes
imagery.
for it in those moments too, doesn't he? I mean, you know, it's just he fills every participle of his bones with, you know, all that feeling and gusto, and you know, a little bit of melodrama that just really plays so well and beautifully.
Oh,
and,
especially
nobody does it like him. I mean,
over the top.
Crazy over the top. Yeah. But you know, a little bit like Bruce Campbell does, you know, in Evil Dead, in the Evil Dead movies. You know, they both have that same kind of tone in some of their delivery.
Apparently in some of the
material.
later comics of like West or whatever, they had Ash and him meet up and do a verses. So that's interesting. Of course. Tones clashed one of these days, so that's cool. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
One thing, I guess, before we do wrap up, there was a great, it's kind of just more on when, you know, them being almost hypnotized by this power that the dimension brings. But when Combs gets his third eye, he actually does say, like, it's truly beautiful, as if he sees something that no one else can experience. But then, of course, he goes on to eat brains and just go totally insane. So it's interesting that he both feels something like total contentment with life, and then all of a sudden he becomes
ridiculously
insane.
There's something for the horror fan, because writes these movies for the horror fan. We think that the other world is beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people that don't watch horror movies don't. But we do.
Yeah.
We think it's cool.
Yeah, I like that, yeah.
It's true. And I do think that because he does eventually when his gland opens up so much or whatever, and he's got the little snake in his head, and he's coming around, he's eating brains, and the doctor the doctor's just like, hey, please don't do that. Like, she says it very calmly, actually.
Please don't eat those. Please don't eat those.
Yeah, like, that's not good for you, man. Please don't do that. And then he sucks out her eye, and then he's eating people, and that's when he ties you up, right? He kidnaps you, or he
what happens?
I'm pretty sure that's
somehow
when I'm pretty sure
he gets there, yeah. Because he just starts taking out medical staff until he finally gets back to the place.
And then he handcuffs Catherine.
Right.
Yeah.
That's when the bomb sets off and all.
Then Catherine is being like, why are you doing this? Like, we're friends. Like, we're doing something. And I think at that point he is being at least minorly possessed by Pretorius. And that sort of this illusion of creating a new form and all-consuming being of pure knowledge and mind and all these things, and that's when you, Barbara, you bite his gland right off.
Yeah, I love that part.
Yeah, was that a lot of fun? Because it seemed like you had a good time in that scene.
It was, and I remember we only had like one pineal gland sticking out of his head, so they said, make sure you get a good grip on it with your teeth, and we're not going to be able to like do it again. I've had so many moments in movies like that, especially with heavy special effects,
right,
where they say, we got one shot with the blood and on your blouse, we only have one blouse, or we have one pineal gland, so make that chomp a really good chomp.
Well, you do, because I
don't screw it up.
I visibly like cringed.
Yeah, I was like, oh, that's.
Oh, for a guy, that must be horrific to see that, because of course it brings up those images in your mind.
For sure. I mean, Lovecraft, especially in general, he really does bring those, inspire those images in people.
Sure.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's when he finally realizes that, hey, I'm Crawford. Like, what am I doing? I don't want to be part of this Pretorius thing.
Yeah.
I
prefer love, not this crazy power-driven, whatever. Even
and
if
together
it's
they all work.
All the wisdom in the world.
They all work, and they tear Pretorius apart from the inside and destroy the Resident Evil and escape. And obviously, Catherine is changed forever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess we'll enter the reductive rating round on this one. Barbara, again, don't have to join us. Don't have to do it. You don't. But I do have a question for you though, as we're entering it though. How does it feel when you go back and you watch these movies? Like, does anyone ever like sit you down and is like, do you ever watch them? Because I gotta imagine that's got to be a weird experience.
Sometimes I watch them for special screenings, which I get invited to quite a bit. So, I mean, sometimes I'll introduce the movie and then I'll go out and get a drink and then I'll come back and answer questions. But occasionally I will watch a few of the movies. And I'm always pleasantly surprised that I feel better about them years later, because when you're a performer in a movie, you look at your individual performance and you think, oh, I wish I'd said that line differently, or I don't really like that moment, or I could have done better, I mean, any artist feels that way about their work, right?
Definitely.
But the farther away I get from it, I look at it and I go, all right, that wasn't so bad,
Yeah.
It's a pretty good movie, and there were some good moments in it, and I didn't suck too bad. I was all right. So I generally have those feelings. But the first time I see him, I'm better now. I'm better than I used to be, but I always would cringe anytime I would see myself on film. I totally suck,
Okay.
But it gets better. It gets better. So now I do appreciate them now. And since I came back with Your Next a number of years ago, I had taken a break from filmmaking, and then I came back. And now I've really rededicated myself to being in the horror genre and working again and acting again. And I'm so happy to be doing that. And so I go back and over the last 5 or 6 years, I've watched so many more horror movies than I've ever watched in my entire life. And I have a new appreciation for them. And I understand the 70s, 80s, 90s. I know now different genres and what they kind of did. Probably not as good as your listeners or as you guys, who are fans. Maybe
Well, do you know
Josh,
what, honestly?
Jamie, because you're the newbie. But
we're right there.
But yeah,
we're trying,
yeah, but I have a lot of forgiveness for myself now, and an appreciation for a lot of what we actually accomplished and did, and
for sure. And you
I'm so thankful that we have these people that consider these movies cult classics now, and I have so much appreciation for the fans who love the movies too.
Oh yeah, and there's a lot of great work from honestly everyone on these films, and I would honestly say in particular the performances. I think Gordon, coming from a theater background, really was able to, and alongside with you and Jeffrey, and then was able to a lot of these films don't want to. Sometimes they want to be genre exercises, and I think that these films could have been that, but I think that there is real character, and there are, especially in Re-Animator, there's real heart, and there's there's a lot more happening in the screenplay and in the performances here, and then all you have to do is translate some of that Lovecraft craziness, and you have yourself a kind of heartbreaking and horrifying genre film from honestly kind of both of them.
Right. Well, let me say this too when you talk about Stuart Gordon directing people, because sometimes I work on movies today and I don't have a lot of collaboration with the director, because they just kind of hire me and I do what I do, and some directors do that anyway, even some of the greatest directors of all time, Woody Allen, whatever you think of what's going on in the news about him. I mean, he famously doesn't really talk to the actors so much about their performance. It
seems an odd way to do that, but
they just go in and do it, and I've heard that about a few other people, where they don't really talk to you about how to mold the scene or mold your characters. And Stuart, because of his background, was always talking to me about my character and my inner life and what I should be feeling in this moment. And
that absolutely comes through.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, I was heavily directed in all of the movies I've worked on with him. And I've worked on movies. I worked on a movie recently where I was working on it for a few days, right? And the director was never saying anything to me. He wasn't saying, "Oh, that was good. Okay, moving on," or "Oh, I love that scene," or "Oh, that was a nice moment." We do the scene, and he would say, "Okay, moving on." That would be it. No, that's good. Moving on. Just moving on.
Interesting.
And I'm working. Yeah, I'm working on this movie, and then I was kind of feeling very insecure and thinking, am I all right? Does he like it, and that's why he's moving on, or do I really suck and he thinks, oh, that's the best we're going to get out of this girl, so I'm not even going to say anything. And so I'm working with this other actress, and we finished the scene, and she says, and he goes, okay, moving on to blah blah blah, and she goes, well, did you like it? and I stopped and I looked at her and I burst out laughing, because I was holding in this feeling of, do you fucking like it?
That's amazing.
And he goes, oh yeah, it was good. It was really good. Yeah, moving on. And then I was like, oh, okay, that's just that guy. And and I'm in a director's movie, so I feel like I have to work the way they want to work. And if somebody wants to talk to me a lot, they have a lot of other things on their mind besides, if I need their help or if I don't need their help, or, how they want to talk to me or whatever. So I try to take my cue from them. And if they want to talk to me, I'll talk back to them. And if they don't, okay, I'm not doing it. But this was one instance where I was getting no feedback at all, at all. So whatever. So every director is different.
It's got to be a weird experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
You kind of arrive on set, or maybe the director a little bit, and you kind of might know a little bit how they might like to work, and and sometimes you just develop a rapport with the other actors too, and you kind of also talk about the scene. What do you want to do in the scene? What do you think's going on? How should we play it? And even some actors don't want to talk to you. It's all different, so you just show up, and whatever you get is what you get, and you have to work with whatever that energy is. But with Stuart, his movies have a certain look and a feel, and a little melodrama, you know, partly because it was the 80s, but partly because that's him, and he did come from the theater, and he really wanted to hit home certain points, and so we were all heavily directed, you know, but he's like a god to us. So we're like, okay, what do you want? What do you want us to do? You know, well, we'll do it for you. What do you want from us?
Now,
you know?
because of my own morbid curiosity, I have to know, what was it like? He's my all-time favorite filmmaker, or one of them, Brian De Palma. You talk about working with directors and how they work with you.
Yeah.
How was, because I know from what I understand for Body Double, that was your first feature that you worked on?
Yeah.
From what I understand, you shot a bunch of scenes that ended up sadly getting cut. I honestly kind of wish that they were in there.
No, I didn't shoot those scenes because the night before
them.
They called me and they said the dialogue scenes are cut.
So they knew before they even started shooting that they were going to get rid of all the dialogue scenes. That's so sad.
I had a character. And the night before they said, oh, the dialogue scenes, and there was only 2 dialogue scenes, but they were, you know, there was something to them. There were a couple of pages, and it was with Craig Wasson, and we were trying to get back together, and we were having problems, I think, in the first scene, and that's why, you know, she had an affair with the guy, and then after we do have some interaction after he caught me having sex with that guy. Anyway, those are the scenes I auditioned on, and they said, oh, by the way, there's one scene with nudity, and I was like, oh, all right, it's Brian De Palma, so I'll do it. So then the night before they said, oh, those scenes are cut, do you still want to do the part? And, you know, at that point I was like,
well, it's my first
it's
movie.
Brian De Palma. It's my first movie.
Yeah.
I can't say no.
De Palma.
so I did. But to answer your other question, which I think you're going to ask about, is he
seems like a wild man.
I don't think he was really wild. I think he's a very visual storyteller. So I think a lot of times when I felt like he was directing me, even though it was just a small scene that I was in, I felt like it was more visual than anything else. And he didn't really, you know, he wanted me to show different. I mean, we shot that scene all day from different angles, and he just wanted me to have different looks on my face, you know, depending on how he thought in the final edit what emotion he wanted from me. So, you know, I mean, I think I was probably crying in some of them, you know, or starting to cry, or just really shocked, or, you know, just heavy in the moment and not even paying attention to him. And then, you know, that was the moment he chose. But, yeah, I don't know if, like, I can't speak about him and, you know, what he does. Yeah. With other people that have talking scenes. Yeah. I don't know.
Brian. Well, we'll never forgive him for that one.
Yeah.
We're writing him off right now.
Yeah.
Well, he's an amazing filmmaker, and I was proud to say I've been in one of his movies, and I saw that documentary that, you know, he was sitting there in a chair and just talking about his career and his life, and it was compelling, you know, beginning to end. So
I liked how many times he said "holy mackerel" in it.
Yeah, like sweet guy.
And then he talked shit about Hitchcock for like 3 seconds. He said The Birds was terrible, and I was like, well, that's a little.
Yeah, he does a direct remake.
Yeah.
Basically.
He's just an odd man in general. Yeah, but he does make excellent films.
He's such a talent.
And
yeah.
Well, yeah. So I guess we're still on the reductive rating.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Here we go. Hold on. From Beyond. Before we get too far away, From Beyond. For me, it's 4. Nice. But I love it. It's just there's nothing much else I can really say about it that we haven't already said. But I think that that you and Jeffrey switching roles for this one is, you know, it really does change the film significantly. Like, I like this one in almost different, even though they have, you know, sort of crossover themes. I like From Beyond in almost a completely different way than I like Re-Animator.
Definitely.
And I really do think that it, you know, speaks wonderfully to the double-edged sword of, you know, our own curiosity and exploration. And I think that the budget that you guys got for this one makes the tone and the you know the makeup even more unrelenting. And you know, and I think again that you guys made some really compelling characters out of this, and I do think that honestly I think both films have kind of amazing endings to them that makes me it kind of reinvigorates me every time I watch each one.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love this one a lot. for you, Jamie?
Thank you.
I'm gonna give it a 5.
Wow,
yeah.
you're giving it more than Re-Animator.
Yeah, this
Re-Animator was a 4 for you.
Yeah. This one, I don't know what it was. I think, well, one is I've always been more interested in the kind of philosophical, the different dimension, transcendent, that kind of stuff. So that helped a lot. I also love that you had a bit of a more meaty role in this one.
Right.
In comparison to Re-Animator. I mean, both are fantastic, but I really enjoyed your performance in this one. And
Thank you.
then the effects, how abstract they get with all of the crazy body horror and all that. The scene where Combs' head is twisted off. And like, it's just there's so much to chew on in this movie, and I absolutely loved it. So yeah, I'm gonna give it a 5. For sure.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Wow.
Well, there you go. And this is the part where we leave it up to kind of the listeners. They kind of take it over from here, and they discuss and they rate, and we have it kind of climb the ranks. We have an ongoing list, Barbara, where we kind of just all based on the ratings, everything kind of goes up, and we're as we go along, we're kind of creating a canon of these kinds of horror films for people who are into maybe the weirder ones.
Yeah.
You know,
trying to expose a few films maybe that people haven't heard of as well, maybe.
But it was really awesome having you on. Thanks again so much.
Thank you
for coming
so much.
On.
Yeah.
This is the part usually where we have a guest plug whatever it is that they're gonna plug. And from what I understand, you have a movie coming out this summer.
Yes, the reimagining of Puppet Master.
Now, I've never seen a Puppet Master film. Do I have to watch all the Puppet Master movies before I do this?
I think you watched the first 3, maybe.
Okay.
After that, you're. It's up to you.
I know. There's a lot of them.
Well, I think the first 3 had much bigger budgets,
Okay.
and then after that, I think they didn't so much. And most people, when they talk about the Puppet Master series, they do talk about the first 3.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what I'll say about it. It's Puppet Master, The Littlest Reich. And for those listeners who do know the movies, I will say that in this one, Andre Toulon is a Nazi sympathizer, and it all takes place during a convention that marks the 30th anniversary death of, some things that happened way in the past. And there's a convention, and there's going to be a sale and an auction of some of the puppets. So 30 years later, people come back together, and I'm an ex-police officer who's now a tour guide, and I give a tour at this mansion. And there's a lot of different characters that come from all over the world to sell their puppets, and something magical happens at the convention. I want to say horror movie convention, but at the puppet convention, and it's coming out August 17th. And
we'll probably
I saw it, and it's very bloody and very gory and really over the top and very grindhouse. And I was even shocked at because I wasn't on set the whole time, and when I saw the movie, I was like, holy crap. Oh yeah, there was a few kills in the movie that that they even added afterwards. They shot some extra footage, which is normal in a movie. You go back in and you shoot a few extra scenes to maybe fill in.
You do the first cut and you see what you feel is missing.
Right. And they shot some crazy stuff. So it was definitely a crowd pleaser at the premiere that I went to.
Awesome. Well, I think that we and probably a lot of our fans are going to be checking that one out. But also,
maybe we can do a Puppet Master episode.
Yeah, if everyone wants to see Barbara doing more stuff, I personally will recommend Little Sister, which is a film that's on Netflix, which is a great little film about a quirky little young nun, and it's a lot of fun.
What year did it come out? I think
2016.
I have that on my list on Netflix. I think actually.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. I didn't actually know you were in that. That's awesome.
Yeah. It's not really a horror movie. It's more of a comedy, sort of coming of age.
Drama,
yeah.
But it's nice,
drama.
and I think that you honestly
it's a nice
did some pretty
movie,
good work in it. So everyone should check that one out too. But I think that's going to do it for this week's
awesome
Sleazoids. Everyone, thanks so much for tuning in. What are we doing next week, patrons? What are patrons getting?
We're doing Rio Bravo.
Oh yeah.
And
Assault on Precinct 13.
That's the one.
Yeah, so we're doing the Howard Hawks Western, Rio Bravo. with John Wayne, and we're going to be pairing it with a film that was inspired by John Carpenter's Assault on Precinct 13. So for patrons, you guys will be getting that. And then 2 weeks from now, we're going to be back talking,
I'm not sure
I think
on
it's
this one.
Savage Streets and Stage Fright Aquarius. 2 films I know absolutely nothing about.
Never even heard of
But
those.
a horror guru of ours has selected them as her films for when she comes on in 2 weeks' time.
Cool.
So, again, we're excited to kind of explore new realms as we continue on with the show.
Yeah.
Again, Barbara, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Everyone, keep it sleazy out there.
Keep it sleazy.
Bye.
Awesome.